welcome to the Claude G. Perkins Living and Learning Center. My name is Regina Cheney. I am the Senior Outreach and Engagement Specialist at Home of Virginia. And today we will be talking about credit inequality and housing access. A special thank you to the NACA Economic Justice and Advocacy Center here at VUU. And that person who runs that is Mr. Smith. Thank you again for hosting this event. I want to tell you a little bit about Home before we move on to some of our other guests and our panelists. Home of Virginia stands for Housing Opportunities Made Equal. We've been serving Virginia residents for about 52 years, a little over 52 years. And we are a private, nonprofit, civil rights, and fair housing organization. We investigate and litigate housing discrimination allegations based on federal and state protected classes. We do statewide testing, which is a technique that we use to sort of identify where housing discrimination has occurred or to confirm it. We provide housing counseling and education with all of our programs that we provide. We also provide down payment assistance to first-time homebuyers. And first-time homebuyers a first-time homebuyer is defined as someone who has not owned a home in 3 years. So it's not that you can't have ever had a home, just that you haven't owned one in 3 years. We provide, like I said, down payment assistance to folks in the Richmond, who are purchasing in the Richmond metropolitan area and other surrounding counties. It's just like Richmond, Henrico, Chesterfield, Hanover, Goochland, Powhatan, New Kent. I mean, we do a lot of lending. Now, and I will say that I've been at Home a long time. I've been there 36 years. I wrote the first grant for down payment assistance, and back then, $3,000 was what we were given as grants, which was a big deal. Today, our average grant is anywhere between $15,000 and $25,000, given what we're dealing with in this housing market. We also assist families who are facing foreclosure to avoid that. We provide financial assistance to families who are facing eviction. We provide money management and credit counseling, credit workshops. And we do a lot of outreach, of course, in education, and we have a research and policy team that use internal and external data to drive policy related to housing issues. So that's a lot about Home. I'd like to turn it over now to Dr. Harriet Scott, and she will introduce our panelists we have with us today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cheney. My name is Harriet Scott, and welcome to our living room. Ms. Cheney mentioned that we're in the living and learning space, and so this is the living room. To all of you watching us virtually, welcome. To those of you who are joining us physically, welcome as well. I would like to introduce our panelists to you and read a little bit about them, but I want to do that so that I'm sure we have. Do you think they'll do that? Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And we will start with our first panelist. Help me give a warm welcome to Ms. Chris Kane. Ms. Kane works for the People's Advantage Federal Credit Union. She is the Chief Lending Officer. For more than 15 years, Chris Kane has been on the front lines helping people open business by educating them on business planning, helping navigate the business loan process, and creating a living, breathing entrepreneur ecosystem. Her experience running nonprofits and building rich ecosystems driven by economic development makes her uniquely qualified to raise the profile of any organization she works for and increase its impact. She sees education support and access to capital and access to capital come together to help people become self-sufficient, while also giving them a sense of place and ownership side by side with those they care about most. She is currently the Chief Lending Officer for People's Advantage Federal Credit Union. She is also on the board of directors for the Virginia CDFI Coalition, Startup Champions Network, and Forward Cities. Chris is committed to social justice and has a mission to inspire people to take action through storytelling by painting a vivid picture of how we can all be better together. And again, welcome, Ms. King.
Thank you.
Next to Ms. Kane, we have Mr. Cedric Smith, our very own Mr. Cedric Smith from Virginia Union University. He serves as the director of NACA, Economic Justice and Advocacy Center here at Virginia Union. Cedric is and you know at Virginia Union we would say Mr. Smith is the first appointed director of the newly established NACA Economic Justice and Advocacy Center at Virginia Union University. He is a HUD certified housing counselor and licensed mortgage loan originator with a decade of experience as a regional director for NACA, the nationally recognized housing counseling agency that offers America's best mortgage. Cedric's primary mission is to manage the partnership between Virginia Union and NACA so that all Virginia Union students, faculty, staff, and alumni achieve their rightful slice of the American dream, home ownership. Please welcome Mr. Smith. On the other side of Ms. Kane, a man who needs no introduction, please help me welcome Reverend Dante McCutcheon, also from Virginia Union University. He is our Director of Total Wellness and Life Services. He's the coordinator here. He is a distinguished graduate of Virginia Union University. He is currently working toward finishing his PhD in social change. Welcome, Reverend McCutcheon. And sitting to my left, we're rounding this out with this powerful gentleman who I just need to learn some of what he does, even in the title. Please help me welcome Mr. Frank Mosley II. He is affiliated with the Center for Common Ground. He's the director for that center, and it's the Center for Common Ground's Democracy Centers. He is a social entrepreneur. So those of you who are looking for titles and occupations, please find out what that means and what he does. He's a social entrepreneur, a certified financial literacy instructor, and an asset protection specialist. Mr. Mosley is a relational organizer and founder of the Social Education for Economic Development Initiative, an organization to remove barriers adversely impacting economic growth for low to moderate income people of color in underserved communities of Virginia. He currently serves as the director for the Center for Common Ground's Democracy Centers program, where he empowers 14 centers in 9 states to inform, organize, and mobilize communities of color to get out and vote. He also serves as a board member for Resolutions Addressing Systemic Racism, an organization focused on engaging both sides of the color line to effect actionable change in the laws, policies, systems, and practices that established and cultivated systemic and structural racism. Mr. Mosley is also an active member of the Enrico Hanover Reentry Council. Please welcome, rounding out our panel, Mr. Frank Mosley II. And at this time, we're going to call your attention to the screen behind you where Ms. Cheney will walk us through what you are seeing, and then we will ask for insights from our panelists, and then we will also ask you if you have any questions. Ms. Cheney, back to you.
All right, thank you. Again, at Homer, Virginia, we have been working on our mission overall is equal access to housing for all Virginians. And we have been working on housing discrimination allegations, cases. We've actually had some landmark cases that has changed how fair housing work is done. We've been involved with many large cases that have taken place across the country. But also, as we look at home ownership and just housing in general, we've found some issues that have continued to stay in place. Okay, no matter how much work we do, there's something that's standing in the way. And so that's when we came up with the credit inequality and housing access. Now, we talk a lot about home ownership, but we're talking about housing in general. Home ownership is a big step. It is a way to build generational wealth. But we're also talking about general housing because home ownership may not be for everybody. We know that. Some people don't want to mow the grass. Some people don't want to have responsibility. Some people want to move around. They don't want to be stable. But we're talking about housing as a basic right. And in so many cases, and especially today, when we're looking at the cost of housing, there's some big issues. So, first thing we want to talk about is the Fair Housing Act, which went into which became law April 11th, 1968. Right now, the homeownership gap between Black and white homeowners is greater today than it was then. Okay? Now, when the Fair Housing Act was passed, there were some things put in place, certainly, and things looked as if they were changing. And then within the last 20 to 30 years, it seemed, we've been going backwards, right? And the question is, why is that happening? So, when you look at this scale here, Black and white homeownership gap in Virginia 2020. In 2020, the total number of folks who closed loans and got keys to houses, 73% of those new homeowners were white and only 48% were Black. And the question is, why is this way?
Absolutely, that is the question. I'm going to pass the mic to you first, Mr. Mosley, and Ms. Kane. I'm also interested in your perspective.
Well, thank you so much, and again, thank you all for having me. I appreciate this opportunity to speak. I'm just really so proud of all the young adults that have come here today to learn more about credit inequality and just how to become homeowners, because it's really important. Dr. Scott talked about what I do, just really briefly, just to talk about social entrepreneurship. And what that basically means is that I am someone who is wanting to make an impact in the community that I either live in or that my democracy centers represent, and that I also want to make some money to be able to support the causes and initiatives. So being able to combine my interest in activism with the actual business models that have been proven successful or new business models is something that I'm very passionate, I'm very interested in. So I've become a serial entrepreneur over the years, and I've learned a lot about different facets of life being in the financial world. You know, a lot of times when we think about finance and we think about credit inequality, we don't really think about what we haven't been taught, right? Because a lot of what we need to know and information, the resources, the programs, it's out there, but how do we access it, right? This is one of those first initial steps to accessing that information, because what people often don't understand is the mentality. I know that there's someone here on this panel that's going to speak a lot about the psychology behind buying a home, but just with finance, when you're dealing with money, right, you're initially thinking about what you can afford. And how does that match the lifestyle that you want to live? And so for some folks, they look at being able to be a homeowner as a big step, something that they don't necessarily want to undertake, especially immediately after graduating college. I know I didn't. I've rented for a while. But the first opportunity that I had to get into a home, I negotiated a contract to lease the home, right? And because I understood the importance and the value at a very young age. I was still in college. And I got a house that was on the college campus, which turns into a very fun place for people to come together. But at the same time, it taught me something very important about being a homeowner, that it's not as hard as sometimes people have made it out to be. And I think that when you talk about the gap, you're talking about what we have been taught and what has been instilled in us, right? And in our counterparts, our white counterparts, since 1944, when the GI Bill came out, which gave them opportunities to get money for down payments for home, for their education, for starting businesses. They have been able to get a foothold and use that to leverage themselves through generation after generation, to where some of that wealth is still being seen today. It's not all being made off of social media. So just to wrap up what I was saying, because I definitely want other people to be able to add on, but when you start thinking about what you've been taught and what you haven't been taught versus what others have been taught, right? And the fear factor that comes along with that, because you don't know what you don't know and what you haven't experienced. But when you have some people around you that can start to share their knowledge, share their resources, and share their experiences, then you can start becoming more courageous with your exploration of being a homeowner.
Thank you, Ms. Kane. And before we get started, Ms. Kane, those of us at Virginia Union, we are all doing a personalized education plan or a life map. And so for those of you who are doing that, if a house or home ownership is not on your life map, why? And if it were to be on your life map, I want you to listen closely to how you get to that. Ms. Kane?
Thank you so much. Mr. Mosley, I'm such a huge fan of entrepreneurship. Like, that's where my little heart is first. Because the two best ways to build wealth is homeownership is number one. And let me preface, right now it's harder. The mortgage land has lost its mind in the past year or so. It is harder now to buy a house than it was a year ago. Much harder than it was 5 years ago. So education is the key. The second thing is running your own business. Work for somebody else. Or don't work for somebody else, work for yourself. And there's all kinds of resources in this area to help you do so. So, and one thing a social entrepreneur does is we solve social problems through business, right? We make our neighborhoods better. So I'm just gonna give a shout out for social enterprise. Why is this wealth gap in place? It's in place on purpose. It's policies. While you were talking, I read a fantastic book a few years ago called Life Incorporated, and actually talks about the history of like the GI Bill and what happened with who got access to not only fair mortgages. I'll give you a little bit of a hint. Take a look at the word mortgage and read it. What is the root word?
Yeah.
Oh, there's some hinkiness there.
Yeah.
Anyway, the way mortgages were set up before post-World War II, people didn't take out mortgages. They saved money and they bought a house, right? And then the world changed. And then these systems were put into place. Keep in mind what I said was systems. Systems were put into place that had access to capital because they changed the rules, right? No longer was it cash. You had to get a loan to get a house. And that's another thing about education, is understanding how these policies were put into place and why, and then what we can do about them, because we can change them. And but anyway, the home ownership inequality was put there on purpose. It became harder to get a loan, or impossible to get a loan if you're Black, right? And it's still the case, but they hide it's underneath policies and fancy legal language, try and hide it a little bit. But it's up to us to have these very candid conversations, to call out those policies as they're written and why they're in place. And call out those financial institutions like credit unions and banks to change them. And so I'm just going to throw that out there. Like, let's be really clear. This is on purpose. So what do we do about that? What do we do about it?
I'd like to comment. So, just circling back, Mr. Mosley, you hit it on the head. The GI Bill. If you think back to history, I'm not a history buff, but I like history. Anybody remember 40 Acres and a Mule? The promise after Reconstruction, the Civil War, well, that never came to pass. But guess what the GI Bill was? It was a new generation, 40 Acres and a Mule. It's just that we were left out. So we were left out of that. That's point number one. Point number two, Ms. Kane, you are 100% accurate on the fact that the housing market has lost its mind right now. They've lost their mind because it's a question of, you said it's harder to buy a home. And it's not necessarily harder, it's just not affordable. Because the same rules to purchase a home today were in place 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever. The difference now is that interest rates are sky high, housing prices are sky high, so your average Joe can't afford to buy a home. Median home price in America is somewhere around $424,000. $424,000. When I was a kid, we used to pile us 5 kids in the car with mom and dad. That's when we used to go on Sunday drives. And we would drive out to the rich part of town in Kansas City where I grew up. And my dad would say, that house over there costs $100,000. And we were like, whoa, how does anybody afford that? But now the median price of a home is $424,000 in America. That's unaffordable. I couldn't afford that much house. And I make a decent living. So I just wanted to point out some of the things, and look, these numbers are staggering. 73 to 48. That's after 50 years. If you just sit back and think about 50 years of progress, we think we progressed in a whole bunch of stuff, actually until the last president came along. But 50 years later, these numbers are worse than they were 50 years ago. Something's wrong. I'm going to stop talking right now and let Mr. Dr. McCutcheon chime in about maybe some of the mental health aspects of all this. But we'll talk about some solutions as we get towards the end of this.
I would have liked to wait, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know it's okay. It's okay. I would just add piece to when we talk about the health of persons, and we talk about advocacy and the social enterprise and entrepreneurship around housing and money and just education alone. When we think about mental health, when we think about social health and these things, when you ask the question, what do we do? And so I see education as advocacy and education as a tool of healing and a remedy. And the more we know, the more we assist, the better we can become.
All right, we're gonna move on to the next slide, which is why. We've talked a little bit about why there is such inequity there, inequality with regards to credit. Black and white homeownership gap has increased, like we said, over the last 50 years due to a constellation of causes. In the past, we have done reports and exhibits that focused on redlining, segregation, and intentional government action and inaction, as we heard earlier. In addition to those factors, the largest remaining barrier to closing the racial gap are access to capital, the dual financial markets, and the role of credit itself. And before we go on back over to our panelists, I want to move on to this slide. Well, credit, number one, has been around forever. It's about 200 years. And actually, consumer reporting and credit scoring was introduced in the 1950s. So we're not talking about that being around that long either. And basically, credit is the ability to borrow money on the promise to pay in the future. And of course, we all know about the specialized credit bureaus, the Equifax, the TransUnion. What's the other one? TransUnion? Experian, right? Information which summarizes what our activity in a numerical credit score. And a credit score is right now averaging between 300 and 850. Now on the right, I want to do a little bit of Jeopardy here, or one of those games. I don't know which one it is. All right, what's included in the credit report? Can anybody just guess? What? Payment history, right? Yes, and I'm going on this list, okay? But you're right, payment history. But if you start from how many people think that mortgages are included? Okay, everybody, yes, that is true. Credit inquiries.
Yes.
You think so? Okay. That depends. It really all depends. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And maybe some of the panelists can elaborate on that. Income. Anybody think income? Nope.
No.
It's not included. Debt collections? Absolutely. Because when you don't pay, that's usually when you see it, right? Okay. What about payday loans? People know what payday loans are? Yeah, payday loans, are they included? Nope, absolutely not. Now, payday loans are what we will learn a little bit later as a fringe type of credit, but the interest rate is generally extremely high, and it's not reported. Even if you pay as promised, you don't get a benefit for it. And if you miss a payment, that's another story, right? That's when it's there. What about rent?
Start.
Some places we can volunteer.
It all depends. If the place where you rent chooses to put that information or send that to the credit bureau, but generally rent is not included. Which really drives the question is, if typically the rent is not included in the credit scoring or in my credit report, then why when I go to look for housing is my credit score used if my past rental history is not in it? Generally, that person or that entity is going to have to call around and find out, how I've paid, or they look to see if I've had any past evictions. Okay, that's when it's on there, when there's a problem. Utilities, no,
Yes.
that's not included. Now, I will say personally, my rent, my utilities, I will pay. Now, I may not pay JCPenney, okay? I may not pay them every month. I may not pay Macy's or whomever, but I'm going to pay my rent and utilities, and those are two main issues that don't necessarily have to be included, right? Child support, it depends, and that's not up here, but it's on my list. Child support, it depends, and certainly bankruptcy is something that is generally on the credit report. And at the bottom, you say your credit score and rating impacts not just your ability to find housing, but employment, buying a house, starting a business, what interest rate you receive. Because interest rates are high now, but if your credit is jacked up, as one would say, you may still be able to get money. But even if it's at 7.5 now, and because of what your credit looks like, it may cost you 12.5%. Okay? And also, what some people don't recognize is that insurance premiums also are reflected on what your credit, what your premium will be based on your credit report. And that's, auto insurance, homeowners insurance, whatever you have. But that is an issue. And you talk about differential treatment. One of the largest cases that Home worked on had to do with homeowners insurance. What we found, this was before because I think we filed suit. The case closed in 1999 or 2000. but like 5 or 6 years before that, we did some research on homeowners insurance. And what we found with not only several insurance carriers, but mainly the ones we worked with was nationwide. And what we found out over a period of 30 or more years, that nationwide either did not insure properties that were particularly in predominantly African American communities, which is a sort of redlining, but on outskirts they did. Okay, and in the suburbs, sometimes the premiums they would write the policy, but it would be much higher. And it was amazing because some of the testing that we did was right over here in Northside. And if you notice on, let me see, what is that? Brooklyn Park Boulevard. I think it's Brooklyn Park Boulevard. That sort of separates the north from the south or so. And we did testing on houses on both sides and found a big difference as to what the premiums were. Well, when we filed that suit, it was at that time the largest jury verdict in the history of fair housing cases, and we were awarded $100 million. Now, once Nationwide, of course, realized that this was real, of course, they came back to the table and said, we'd like to renegotiate. So we didn't really get $100 million. Because if we did, I don't know if I think I'd still be here. I might have retired right now. But we still got a substantial amount. But what was most important about that particular case, and many cases that we work on, is about changing the behavior of those who did wrong to begin with, right? So that's what we're really looking for. So let's see, before we get, do any panelists want to make comments on any of the issues of credit and how it's used?
Thank you, Ms. Cheney. I was going to learn how to work the microphone, and when I do, I think I have it. If you were advising or doing financial literacy for the age group of 18 to 21, still in college, what would you tell them about credit, and how would you advise them to approach it? And I'm wondering if your perspective will be different from your perspective. And then Reverend McCutcheon, as an employee, somebody who has passed through medical bills, and I get pink slips, and it affects my health and wellness because I'm working every day and it just seems like it's overwhelming. How would you tell me to deal with that? So those three questions in that order: Mr. Mosley, Ms. King, and Reverend McCutcheon.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that question. You know, when I think about credit, and I wonder if everybody really understands what credit is, right? A lot of people will get themselves in trouble with credit because they think it's money. Money is not credit, all right? It's not a debit card. It's a loan. And your credit score is what they use to evaluate and talk about your APR, the percentage that they're going to charge you for taking out that loan, right? So with education about finance, you really need to understand how everything is a system. Just like playing a game. Any video game, you pick up the controller to, it has rules. If you can figure out how to play the game according to the rules, more than likely you're going to win. It may take you a few times, right, to get it right, but if you find some cheat codes, if you go on YouTube and you're walking, got a walkthrough video to help guide you, it becomes a lot easier, right? So the first thing I would say is that everything's a system. So it's just about understanding the system. And then once you understand the system, how do you utilize that system to benefit you, right? Because credit is really about being able to leverage something that you don't have, which is money. Because if you had the money, then you probably wouldn't need the credit, right? If you got $1 million and something only cost you $50, why would you go and get a loan from your friend or from a bank and pay somebody interest when you have the money? But when you don't have the money, that's when you want to go and try to open up a line of credit, right? And you start building your credit history by making those payments, right? You find that account that's going to report to one of those 3 credit agencies. And then you're gonna make your payments not just on time, you're gonna make them ahead of time. Because one of the things that creditors look at is not only are you continuously making your payments when you're supposed to, but what about when you make it early, right? What does that tell them? That tells them that you're not only credit worthy, but you're eager to make sure that you make a really good impression. Because at the end of the day, your credit score is an impression of your payment history, your obligation to your debts, and your ability to pay back those debts, right? And so if you can start understanding, well, if I have a high credit score and I can go out and take out a loan with a low interest rate, now I've leveraged myself in a way that I wasn't able financially to do before. Because I don't have to have that capital to start that business. I don't have to have that money to go on that vacation, right? I have a responsible way to pay it back and pay it back on time. And now that's boosting my credit score. So understanding the system, understanding the rules to the game, how you can play the game and basically manipulate the rules to your benefit, which is what they've been doing since the system's been invented. Somebody created the game, they created it for a reason, right? And that game maker knows how to win the game, or else he wouldn't have been able to create the game. So if you understand that there is an answer to every problem when it comes to finance, money is math and math is money, right? You can solve those problems, then your financial position, your financial stability, your financial freedom will all be reflected from it.
Exactly what he said. However, I'm gonna put on the banker hat. I got two banker hats, so I'm gonna answer it like a regular banker, and then I'm gonna answer it as a CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution banker. I am a banker. I don't look like a banker. I don't talk like a banker. I certainly don't think like a banker. See, that's the point. That's one of the ways we can change, make real changes. We change the rules on how financial institutions lend money. And one of the things that Mr. Mosley said that I wholeheartedly agree with is this is a game. You gotta learn the rules. And sometimes those rules aren't fair. So if you take a look up there, those your rent or your cell phone bill isn't going to help you build credit, but I guarantee you the first time you miss a payment, they're going to make a report or an indication on your credit report that you are not credit worthy or we can't trust you with money. Because that's what this is, the assumption, the underlying assumption here is that you have a better character, you are a better person if your credit score is higher. And that's a load of bleep, but that's the assumption, right? And that's part of the fear and the mythology that goes around credit score, right? And what also is actually true, not a myth at all, is if you have a low credit score or no credit score, it is going to be more expensive for you. And again, that's on purpose. Getting access to capital and access to credit isn't the hard part. Because you can go online and get money anywhere. You are going to pay a lot of money for it, though. Talk about interest rates. I've seen interest rates as high as like 300, 400%. Oh, yeah, that's legal. It's called predatory lending. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it is a game. And so becoming aware of what the rules of the game are and how it's played is really important to do it young. Do it now. You know, and I also want to say too that the ability to not only borrow money but also the credit bureaus. You know how we mentioned TransUnion, Experience, and Equifax. The thing is, their algorithms on how they calculate credit scores are actually secret. So we have a good assumption on what goes into your credit score, but they're not going to tell you exactly what goes in it. And again, that's on purpose. But yeah, credit's a game. And that's as a CDFI person. As a regular bank, what they're going to say, if you have a credit score lower of 620, we're not going to talk to you. That's kind of it. Now, I'm being a little gloom and doom, but not really. If you don't have any credit score, and I'm gonna go ahead and give a shout out for our mortgage product. We've actually created, this is what being a CDFI means, a community development financial institution. We actually create tools and more like mortgage products that reflect the needs of the members in which we serve. So we have a home loan product that if you have no credit score or a credit score as a low as 580, we will give you a mortgage, right? And what we will also do is we can actually give you a grant up to $15,000. They'll actually stack with all the other grant programs that are out there. So that's what I'm saying. Financial institutions can take a look at their policies and change them if they want to. Most of them won't because there's too much money to be made.
My question was about the mental health around it all and being young, I guess, and knowing first on the wheel of wellness, there's this piece called financial, right? Financial wellness. It's easier to like live a happy life when you have a great relationship with finances. And so as we were talking, there's some things that I would say, with medical bills and all kind of things going on, I myself trying to secure housing to buy a home myself, emergency savings, budgeting, setting financial goals, but also celebrating. It is important to celebrate if you want to stay well. You celebrate as much as possible. The fear of making wrong decisions when there's this interesting, emotional connection to buying a home and all the things that you have to do and the pressures of life in general that comes, not just with bankers and loans and mortgages. You have to find space and time and give yourself grace to celebrate. If you celebrate as much as possible, it will assist you in living whole and being whole, right? But also building a healthy relationship with money. Building a healthy relationship with money and also with what I call payment regimens, where, we get excited about payments. Our regimen, we eat 3 times a day. We do this, this regimen. We have to build a regimen of paying things and doing things. And this is how we, commit to this journey of wholeness and this journey of what we call wellness, total wellness. That's our department, total wellness and life services. Happier lives when we build great relationships with what we know we are required to do. I hope that sounds all right.
Yes.
Does that sound okay?
Amen.
Okay. That sound all right?
Amen.
Okay, thank you guys. We're having a great time here. I know I am. And I want to talk to the leader of the CFI because I want to know more about that.
Oh, yeah.
I did want to make a comment too about payment. And somebody said it over here. When you pay your bills, those that are included or not included, it is the mode in which you pay, not how much you pay. Now you need to pay at least the minimum. But say for instance you have a minimum payment, and I always use JCPenney's, of $25 a month. Okay, something's going on now, and you're about to pay bills. We're laying out our sheet, we're writing out our budget today, and we need to do something else, right? So we were like, I'll skip JCPenney and I'll pay him, $50 next month. It don't work that way. It's the mode in which you pay. So you need to make at least the minimum payment and figure it out, okay? But not how much you pay. Not less than the minimum, but as long as you're consistent, that's the important piece. So what causes credit inequality? So we have this thing called the dual credit market in our country. If you see to the left, mainstream, you talk about prime mortgages, savings, and checking accounts. We're talking about lenders like the Truist, the Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and those particular institutions that are fully functional, safe, and regulated. They can help build wealth and certainly are credit builders. We see a lot of upper middle income and predominantly white communities have reliable access. The fringe side, we got the pawn shops, check cashers, payday lenders, rent-to-own shops, title lenders. These markets are barely regulated, they're ineffective and unsafe. This has a lot of equity stripping and wealth depleting. These products are designed for borrowers to fail with unreasonable terms to increase profits for the creditor. And these are mainly located in lower income communities and communities of color. So the next slide, as we get into our conversation with the group, what we want to look at is where those payday and title lenders are. Okay, now I don't have a pointer, but you see where the yellow is going up there? That's Broad Street, right? When you look at Southside, right here in Southside, where are all those payday lenders? And when you look at the color, look at the color scale over here. The dark, thank you, somebody had a pointer, I don't know where it's coming from, but the 75, where you see the darker green, 75% of those residents are people of color. And this is an actual map of Richmond, okay? And you see where the red dots are. When you look at the yellow dots, which are branches, top 30 mortgage lenders, the lighter the green gets, the more concentrated they are. They're not in our communities. And unfortunately, what we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years is there's some larger lenders that have been closing branches in communities of colors or where a community is predominantly a community of color and middle to upper income. They have closed them faster than they have closed them in white communities with lower incomes. Okay, it's the whole thing of this is not by accident, this is by design. Okay, so as we look at this map, I'd like to put it out to the panel here, and what do we like to discuss here?
I want to do a time check with our person. Are we good on time? All right. Okay, so the map, the fringes, the all of that, thoughts. And I'll just open it up to anyone who wants to speak.
I'll take a stab at it.
Okay. And, but
One, you're absolutely right. Payday lending moves into communities of color and low-income communities on purpose. Financial institutions, like I'm not going to pick on Truists and the Wells Fargo or whatever their names are now. They purposely pull out of low-income and Black communities. One of the reasons why payday lenders are so why they move into neighborhoods like this is because, first of all, whenever you get a payday or a predatory loan, more than likely they you see the ads like no credit check and we'll write the check for you right now. You can walk away with $10,000 today, right? The thing is, they're going to charge you interest, and we can have a class on interest rates. They will charge you an interest rate of something like 49%. I'll give you an example of a car loan. Say 49%. They will make their money back on what they lent you. You might have a 5-year car note. They'll make the money back that they lent you in about 6 months at that interest rate. So once you start getting really strapped, about a year in, paying $700 for a car, they've already made their money from you, and they're going to repo that car because you're not going to be able to make the payments, and it's still profitable for them. That's why they do it. And so it's called predatory on purpose. Now I'm going to throw in a solution. I'm going to toot my credit union's horn a little bit. Like I said, we're a CDFI, and we are literally moving into neighborhoods that other financial institutions have moved out of. Our headquarters is in Petersburg. If you're familiar with Petersburg, we also have a branch right downtown on Perry Street. We had a branch on Broad Street and in the old Genworth building. Genworth shut down, and so they moved out. And in December, we actually partnered with Trinity Baptist Church's credit union. So one of our solutions is that we actually have a mobile branch. So we can take our mobile branch and we can go into neighborhoods and serve them. We were in Trinity Baptist parking lot for 4 months because we had a branch there. That's right off the Brooklyn Parkway, which financial, like you can still see the Bank of America, the empty Bank of America building. They're actually building a branch in the Trinity Life Center. Oh, write this down. On the 28th of October, we're having our grand opening at the Trinity Life Center on Dill Road. So we're going to have a full-fledged branch so that we can do small business coaching and loans, mortgages, and whatnot. But we are purposely moving in to neighborhoods where predatory lenders are found, and we want to be their competition. So that is part of the solution, right? Is having financial institutions like mine have more of a voice in our communities, right? But we talked about this. Right across the street from the Children's Museum, there's a predatory lending organization and a check cashing center. Do you think there is a reason why they're right across the street from the Children's Museum?
Lots of parents.
Lots of parents. Who else would like to?
Get your title back with Title Max. Or how about this one? 877 cash now. These secondary lenders, if you will, there's a reason they're on TV. Because it costs a lot of money to do commercials on TV. They're making money hand over fist. That's why you see all these commercials on. Look, we tune out commercials. But when they come on, I'm paying attention. Who's your target audience? We're a consumer nation. We consume anything. We'll buy anything. But they're preying on us for sure. So there's a reason Ms. Kane was invited here. There's a reason all these panelists were invited here. We had conversations about this stuff. There's a reason all this is happening, and I like the idea of the mobile branch. I even talked to her just briefly, just put a nugget in her ear about putting a branch right here on campus. Right here on campus. But there's a lot of other solutions. Look, we don't have to play this game. We don't have to play the sucker game. And they may as well. This map the map that was up there was my favorite of the entire exhibit because they may as well just overlay it with all the liquor stores and tobacco shops. You may as well overlay the map because that's where they're at. Part of getting past all this is the realization that it even exists. You got to understand what's going on. One last comment on credit. If you don't know what your own credit score is, that's akin to what Mr. Mosley was talking about. You're playing a game of life without knowing the rules. So you need to understand your own personal credit score. Annualcredit.com, annualcreditreport.com is the only place in the country. Annualcreditreport.com is the only place you can get an absolutely free credit report on yourself from all three of the main registered credit bureaus. That is the only place. If somebody gives you a website and says go to freesomething.com, run. Run from it. Freecreditreport.com is not free. They're going to ask you for a credit card. I'm sorry. Annualcreditreport.com is the only legit source to get your free credit report on an annual basis. I'm going to yield.
I want to interrupt for a second when you talk about that map. Some other research that we've done, and we actually have another report that shows this, but when you look at the dark green sections, those same communities were communities that were redlined 30, 40, 50 years ago. Okay, you see the impact? It's still there. So
we're 70 years into redlining.
Yeah. When I live in a neighborhood that was definitely impacted heavily by redlining. And I saw the previous slide, I think I seen it said white flight.
Yep.
And it was the Y thing. And so when we think about this, and this is also an area, I live in an area that's historic for Black people, one. But it's also an area where we're seeing signs now when I go to the ATM saying that this branch is moving soon. November 1, the branch will be moving. And so it breaks up the redlining and all the things like that, the access to lending, the negative side and the positive side. We're seeing this, but housing is a fundamental need. And when you can't find housing, whether you're buying or renting, it leaves you feeling powerless, which leads to all other kind of emotions. And it's all results to poverty. And then now we're seeing things like, dependency on substances and things of that nature. And it's all connected to what's going on. So when we think about the mental health of our family members, our sisters and brothers who share in community with us, a lot of it is connected to what we know to be housing, right? Whether they're buying, whether they're renting a room, a home, or anything like that, their lack of causes them to feel, inadequate, and that inadequacy leads to so many different things. And so when we're seeing this lending where payday loans and title lenders and things of that nature, they're in communities that these persons are in, and now they go to get the loan, but then they're not able to pay the loan back. So now they're not able to keep their word. And it's easier to buy a bottle of liquor than it is to pay the whole loan back. And so now we're saying, oh, these communities are just so bad. They're just, infested with this and they're infested with that. But the truth is, it is the fault of this, what we see, the fringe services, the access to lenders, but which also prevents and works and falls into access to care. You're not necessarily able to do medical care. And so I wanted to speak on that because my position here at the university is holistic. It's total, the whole person. And so when you have somewhere to live, when you have somewhere to lay your head, your body just responds differently. And it's just like, when we don't have access to housing, then our care is in jeopardy. And then when our care is in jeopardy, the way we respond emotionally and intellectually just is all in disarray. And so I did want to put that out there. And also, my last thing is because I have lived through this for, somebody thought I was 40-something, but I'm only 30-something. But I've lived through this for 30-something years, living in a neighborhood that's been affected by so many different things. Living in Jackson Ward, the highway wasn't there. I wasn't here before the highway, but the highway is here now, and how it split a neighborhood in half. And now you see in one neighborhood, that is one neighborhood, well, now we're trying to build a bridge to reconnect when we should have never disconnected it in the first place. And then you put on one side, you put the projects and you tell them that they're poor. And you make the other people on the other side feel like they've made it. But the truth is, what you did was you made it so that they could not live, they could not afford, and white people left. But not only did they leave and take themselves somewhere, they took their influence. And so the black folks couldn't pay for housing. They couldn't live there. And so this is personal to me. This is very personal to me for the health of myself and those whom I share community with.
So when you hear institutionalized racism,
There we go.
systemic racism, this is what it looks like. You got a comment?
Yes.
And get your questions ready.
Yeah, I just gotta add on to that because it's so important that we understand that, like you said, this is intentional, right? When I talk about this, about the rules to the game and understanding the game, when you go back to the why, she had a list of all those things: subprime lending, white flight was one of them, of course. But when you look at what's taking place in these communities where she had the map up, right? You gotta think about these communities have some of the most vulnerable people with some of the most desperate circumstances in front of them, right? And so when we talk about access to capital or access to money, why do they go to these places anyway? It's because they haven't the resources. When I say resources, I mean that they haven't built that credit history where they can go to a bank when they need money, or to a credit union when they need money. They have to go borrow from their friends or their family. And when their friends and family don't have it, what looks available? What's your option? So if somebody says, just bring us a paycheck. Just show us that you got some money coming in and we're going to give you what you need for the moment. Then you're going to take it, right? Because you're desperate. And that's what they do. They take advantage of people in the most vulnerable and desperate moments, knowing that they don't have either the discipline or the experience to be able to pay it back in a timely fashion. Because if you can get in and you can pay it in 30 days, then there's no interest, right? So that's, again, knowing the pitfalls, knowing the gains. But if you can't pay it back in 30 days, you probably couldn't afford it in the first place. And if you needed to take out a loan, then you need to take out a loan the right way, right? And so that's what we have to think about is if there are rules to the games, where are the pitfalls? Where are the things that are going to make us lose all of our money or make us fall back 2 steps when we're moving forward 2 steps? And how do we avoid those? How do we put ourselves in positions to win? And understanding that building your credit history, building your credit score and valuing it, that's how you win. Because you're no longer limited to the access that you have to funding and limited to the access that you have to capital. You're now able to leverage that credit score and say, hey, I need some money. I have a job. I can pay it back. I'm going to pay it back in a timely fashion. Now my credit score continues to rise and go up. It's a win-win. So the other thing I want to just add, because I know we're running close to time, but one of the things that when I learned about just not just affordable housing, but just how the way the world works. 2 of the things that really inspire me to do the things that I'm doing now is understanding that there are 2 things that make this world, this global economy run. And that's money and politics. We don't understand exactly how policy and regulation, but as bad as it is with these fringe lenders, these fringe guys, it was even worse, 10 years ago, before they passed Dodd-Frank, right?
Yep.
So because of policy, because of laws and legislation, they were able to crank down, tamp down on it and limit some of this predatory lending. So understanding finance, understanding politics, understanding how to change those rules to the game so that they don't harm you, or how to avoid those pitfalls so that they don't set you back. Those are key things in credit equality as well as building financial stability. Just wanted to add that.
I'm going to step in right now because I know we are running out of time, and I do want to give people an opportunity to have some questions. So moving forward, because there's so many stories that I could tell you guys that would just blow your mind about inequity, how things are done on purpose. And I'm going to take 5 minutes because I think this one just is always crazy. But a couple of years ago, we had the foreclosure crisis, right?
Yep.
That was, I think, maybe 2007,
708.
08, okay, 7 and 8. 2002, 3, and 4, there was this push for homeownership for all Americans, right? And there were all these creative programs out there. Everybody was giving money. You had no doc loans, you had 1 penny loans, you had no down. You had everybody. You could go in on your looks and say, I like your shirt. We're going to give you $100,000. Or whatever you wanted. You really didn't have to come up with much, right? And so many people became homeowners. And I know in our office, our foreclosure department was sitting back looking, we were like, you know what? It won't be long. This thing is going to blow up. And about 3 years later, sure enough, there was the foreclosure crisis. Now, let me tell you what came out of that. There was a study done about the foreclosures. What we found, and you can talk about Wells Fargo, I mean, they've had some issues. They paid out a whole lot of money because of some things they did, okay? I'll just say it out loud. So anyway, there was a study, we collected some data and found that So many of the folks who lost their homes to foreclosure during the foreclosure crisis were people of color, okay? Once we looked at those loans, it turns out that many people who got these loans, some of them got, and when you do mortgages, you got A paper, B paper, C paper. Of course, A is the best, then B, then C. There were some loans made to folk that got sort of C paper, okay? When they really qualified for A paper. They really qualified for something different, but they were sold on, with a handshake and a smile. This is the best thing for you, all right? And then they end up in foreclosure. But let me tell you, let me put the icing on the cake. So when the property forecloses, so you have your loan with Truist or whomever, and the property forecloses, their mortgage insurance. And so the mortgage insurance is paying, so the bank is not gonna lose a whole lot. So it goes back to the insurer. So we're gonna talk about Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA. All right, well, Fannie Mae was an insurer that received a lot of these properties back, right? They call REOs, real estate owned properties. So during the foreclosure crisis, and all these people had to move out, Fannie Mae decided that in predominantly white communities, they would maintain those properties so nobody would even know that they were foreclosed properties. Looked like the regular community. Just look, everything was going well. In communities of color, they just ran them up. They didn't cut the grass, they didn't maintain the property, and it looked like it was a deserted area, right? It also made the other properties around look bad. Now, mind you, when that study was done and that information was founded, Fannie Mae was notified. This is a problem. We see the difference. And they just act like they didn't know what we're talking to them, okay? All right, it took a little research, but we did an RAO research, and it wasn't just home. We joined a few other fair housing organizations across the country, and so we did it nationwide, right? Well, last year, what was it this year? This is 2023, 2022, there was a settlement with Fannie Mae. 53 million, a billion, I don't know, one of them M's and O's, okay, dollars that they had to pay to the groups of us who did that investigation because you weren't listening. You don't care. Well, okay, pay us. So what we did with that money is that each group received some monies, and now we have created creative programs. Like within home, we have a new program called Worth, and it's a program for families who have never, in their families, you're the first generation to buy a house. So you just, you can qualify, your income could be up to 125%. All right, but if nobody in your house has ever owned a home and you're the first, you automatically qualify. So that's just one of them, but we can be creative. And that's why one of the things you talk about is target funding for equity, special purpose programs. Special purpose programs can help to change a few things. Homeownership assistance programs for disadvantaged groups. The fair data practice, test credit score methods regularly. When she talked about the algorithms, no, we don't really know what's going on, and I can't tell you how many times they've been asked to explain. Stop using credit reports for renting, right? If you don't include it, don't use it. Credit bureaus to change the kind of data they accept and report. Stay accountable. Really to expand the Community Reinvestment Act, which we could spend a day talking about that. Require fair housing training for lenders and housing professionals. Okay, we do testing all the time. And believe you me, when we send someone to a local lender to apply for a loan, it's just like applying for a home. Whereas the handshake and the smile, what's your name again? Chris goes in and she's talking to the lender and it's all smiles and everything's wonderful. And they call her back every other day to just kind of follow up. Mr. Thank you. Cedric goes in. We could do Dr. Dr. Scott. Right, female, right, but black and white. Dr. Scott goes in and she may be even more qualified than Chris, but they still smile and all the same information, but she can't get a call back if she tried. Those are the kind of subtle things that happen that you need to pay attention to. And I say certainly in working with home, one of the things we say is that when something doesn't feel right, don't try to analyze it. Give us a call and let us walk through it. Because there could be unfair treatment of some sort. Okay? What we do, like I do the fair housing training, I'd love to, I'm sure later on we'll do another series here. Cedric asked me to remind folks that in February, Black History Month, the full exhibit of the Credit Inequality will be available over at the Douglas Wilder Library for 2 solid weeks. And during that time, we'll probably have some more discussions about that exhibit itself. I want to thank everybody for participating, but I want to allow the moderator to see if we have any questions. You can certainly follow up with home, join our movement. And somebody said something about creating change and being a part of that. Your voice can be heard. Just like voting, I will give a shout out to some folk from VUU because I went early voting today and there were VUU students and staff out there at the taco truck and we were talking, I was like, you guys go. You know, they were wearing their shirt proudly. I'm like, thank you. So that is very important. We got 140 seats up this year. Every seat in the House, in the Senate is up for grabs come this voting system. Please go out and vote. I don't care who you vote for, but do vote for something. All right, I'm not gonna preach. You go right.
Thank you, Ms. Cheney. And here's what I would say. Those of you joining us virtually, if you have questions, write those questions down, bring them back to that Black History exhibit at the library, and we want to hear them then. Those of you in our audience right now, if you have any questions, we're going to give each of the panelists 2 minutes to wrap up. And raise your hand if you have a question, and then we're going to stay after to answer your questions if you don't have one right now. All right, let's start with you, Reverend McCutcheon. 2 minutes, final thoughts.
My final thoughts are, I am very happy to be here. I am very thankful. I'm excited about this information that we've gone over and the discussions that we have had. I want us to continue to talk about this and to assist one another, that we all be financially healthy, that we all are housed, and that those that are displaced will no longer be displaced.
Thank you. I echo that too. Closing thoughts. First and foremost, I'm super excited to see the exhibit when it comes in February. I was saying, so I've seen a few slides to prepare for this talk today, and it really kind of reignited my interest in not only the problem, right, but calling out what the problem is as honestly as I can, and let's start holding people and organizations accountable. And Home has given some really great examples on how we've done that. There's also organizations like mine. We need to be changing our policies in ways that it makes it much fairer in order to get mortgages and to be able to get the credit that you need. And I also want to be super honest too. One of the reasons why predatory lenders and those check cashers are in low income and Black neighborhoods is because folks don't trust financial institutions. They would much rather pay that higher interest, and because it seems more clear cut. And you know what? There is good reason for them not to trust financial institutions. So being able to hold the industry accountable, all of us have ways to do that. Sometimes it's just as simple as where you have your checking or savings account, because that does matter. So educate yourself about how credit works and how our credit affects our communities and our social, spiritual, and physical health as well.
Smith.
Thank you. It's an honor being here. and I've been holding back the whole time. Look, we could all talk our heads off about this topic. There's so much to be discussed and so many revelations we can talk about, but this is what I'm going to close with. There's only one reason I got hired here at Virginia Union University. Dr. Lucas hired me because I used to work for the biggest housing counseling agency in America, NACA, the Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America. So Dr. Lucas has signed a partnership with NACA. Since I used to work there, I guess I was a logical choice to bring the NACA mortgage program to campus. So if you haven't heard about me, Cedric Smith, and this whole NACA thing, you will soon. All faculty, staff, students, alumni, if you have any affiliation with Virginia Union, you will have VIP access to this Best in America mortgage that features no down payment, no closing costs, and my favorite feature, no regard for your credit score. No regard for your credit score. It's such an arbitrary, abstract. Yes, the algorithms are secret. They probably include your zip code. So if you live in one of those zip codes, oh, okay, you're shot. But anyway, I'm summing up right here now. NACA is coming, Virginia Union. So when you see my face, Cedric, on campus, say, hey, what's up, man? Because I'm going to ask you, got your house yet? Thank you.
Mr. Mosley, final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Listen, I too am excited about the exhibit in February. I hope all of you will have an opportunity to come out and gather more information, learn as much as you can. I think for me, what I want to close with is just to continue to underscore education, right? Understanding money, understanding finance, having a relationship with your money. It's you talk about financial wellness, but just understanding what you want out of life, right? Being able to have a financial plan and to be able to set long and short-term goals. Those things are simple, but are very, very fundamental to building financial success. The other thing I would say is that there are a lot of resources that are being offered to you. Take advantage of them. There aren't a lot of folks that know about programs that can get you a home with no money down and be able to help you with a mortgage with no credit, or you're just establishing your credit. Home ownership is so vitally important, not just as for Black individuals, but just as part of our basic human right. We talked about that. Housing, clothing, food, these are our necessities, basic necessities, right? So we have to think about how we can secure those things in a responsible way. And the last thing I want to just throw in there is think about long-term and generational wealth building. I think Cedric said if you don't have buying a house in your financial plan, put it in there. Sit down with some folks that can help you understand the importance of accumulating an asset like a home and being able to leverage it. You don't necessarily have to live it in your entire life. You can rent it out. There's Airbnbs. Everybody's heard of Airbnb, right? You can sell it. People flip houses all the time. So there are ways for you to leverage your credit, which is a tool. Use your tool, use it wisely, then put it down, right? It's not something you have to abuse. You don't have to carry around with you all the time. Understand the rules, understand your tools, understand your resources. Put all those things together and you will achieve financial success.
Thank you. Ms. Cheney, final thoughts.
So my final thoughts are, number one, I want to thank VUU for putting this together. I will say that as my task is to go around Virginia and meet with all HBCUs and Virginia Union, I am using you all as an example. And so when I meet with the others and we talk about what to do, I talk about what you're doing. And so you're sort of the leader right here. So I want to thank you for that. And anyone here today, please pick up information, homervirginia.org. Look at our website, see what we have going on, see some of the cases, see the rest of the services. All of our services are free. You can't use them yourself, pass them on to family members, friends, and others. Thank you so much, panel. This has been a great experience, and I'm looking forward to the series. Mr. Smith, thank you so much.
All right, please help me thank again all of our guests. This has been the Living Room Conversation. We'll see you next time. Thank you.